would like to make a deal, the easy way. But if we don't do it the easy way, we're going to do it the hard way. And by the way, I'm a fan of Denmark too. I have to tell you, and they've been very nice to me. I'm a big fan, but the fact that they had a boat land there 500 years ago doesn't mean that they own the land. I'm sure we had lots of boats go there also, but we need that, because if you take a look outside of Greenland right now, there are Russian destroyers, there are Chinese destroyers and bigger, there are Russian submarines all over the place. We're not going to have Russia or China occupy Greenland, and that's what they're going to do if we don't. So we're going to be doing something with Greenland, either the nice way or the more difficult way.
The US wants entry into Indian dairy and Indian agriculture. It's a ridiculous demand simply because no Indian prime minister, whether it's Mr. Modi, whether it's some Congress prime minister, whether it's some Samajwadi prime minister, anyone is going to let that happen. They will give some concessions, as in already there are like blueberries and stuff like that. I think there the concessions will be given. I think the US started feeling the pinch as far as soya is concerned, because China stopped buying their soya, right? That's what happened. The Chinese were not buying their soya, or are still not buying their soya. So they need to dump that entire material somewhere, and they're trying to dump it in India. I was like, yaar, main kitni soya chap khaun? America ko koi samjhao? Main nahi kha sakta itni. So
India doesn't
don't
consume
understand
that much soy.
Yeah. So, 2-3 things, like they wanted no tariffs for Harley Davidson. And India immediately agreed. Okay, theek hai, hum Harley Davidson se tariffs hata denge. Look, Harleys are not selling in India. Indians just don't buy that stuff. It is like, okay, tariff hat gaye, kya hua? Now, did I don't know if you saw the Tesla stock India mein jo first stock aaya. They're barely selling any Teslas in India. Indians are not buying even Teslas. So, the Indian market is the Indian market. They will behave the way they want to behave. So for the Americans to have these, because and see what bothers me in this entire discussion, and this is now my question to you is, it's always presented as if, the Indians subsidize their agriculture, they are playing unfair. But the Americans subsidize their agriculture equally. So how do you think the government of India has failed in educating us Indians that, hello, even Americans subsidize their agriculture and they want to dump their subsidized agriculture on us? Do you think that's a fair criticism of the government?
That is a fair criticism. I'm not sure that most Indians even are aware of this fact, right? There's one thing that the government of India is not that great at, and that's at communicating to its own people. This is what the challenge we are facing. This is what the Americans are doing, and this is what the people of India need to know, that we are protecting our market because it needs to happen, but the Americans also have the same policies, and they are often much stronger than what we have. So that's something that I think people like us have to bring out into the public. The government of India is not communicating that. So it's definitely a fair criticism. The government of India has not educated the Indian public sufficiently about what's going on right now, what are the impediments we are facing, and the Americans aren't if they're saying that India isn't playing fair, they have never played fair. But maybe it's something that the government can't do at this point, because we are still in this phase of negotiation. We don't want to offend the Americans by bringing the truth out in front of the people of India. Maybe we're playing nice because we are the junior partner or the junior economy as such. Maybe those considerations come to the picture. So maybe the government won't do it. Maybe we need to do that.
Now I want to play a couple of clips, because ये तो कैसा हो गया मालूम है, वो तेरे को याद है, वो अपन छोटे होते थे तो घोड़ा चतुर या घोड़ा बोलना या चतुर बोलना, वो वाली हालत है ये अमेरिकन्स का था, तो समझ में नहीं आता किसको बोले. So a friend, I think one of the better journalists in India, Shiv ने ये अच्छी क्लिप शेयर की थी. So अभी ट्रम्प एक चीज बोलता है, लट नहीं एक चीज बोलता है.
And Prime Minister Modi came to see me. Sir, may I see you, please? Yes, I have a very good relationship.
So I said, you got to have Modi. It's all set up. You have to have Modi call the president. And they were uncomfortable doing it. So Modi.
So now this is one. Okay, this is from the last one. Now I want to play one more clip. This is so inconsistent. all of it is all over the place, and that's what bothers me about this. अभी ये कुछ उससे पहले यही सेम आदमी लटनिक वो ये बोल रहा था हीरो हमारा लटनिक ये बोल रहा था. Now listen to this.
Any type of deal or backing down to a lower rate with India?
I would expect, like you saw it in Canada, right? The Carney got elected with this term elbows up, meaning let's fight with America. They put on retaliatory tariffs. They were all bravado. And what happened? Their GDP negative 1.6%, unemployment rocketing towards 8%. And what did Carney just do? He just finally dropped his retaliatory tariffs. So I think what happens is it's all bravado because you think it feels good to fight with the biggest client in the world. But eventually your businesses are going to say, you've got to stop this and go make your deal with America. So I think, yes, in a month or 2 months, I think India is going to be at the table and they're going to say they're sorry and they're going to try to make a deal with Donald Trump. And it will be on Donald Trump's desk how he wants to deal with Modi. And we leave that to him. That's why he's the president.
I can assure you that these kinds of comments actually made it worse for the Americans.
Yeah.
Because India might be many things like, okay, I just want to set the record straight. I am not a delusional Indian who thinks India is at par with America. We have no comparison in terms of economic might or military might when compared to America. But we're not pushovers, right? And every time an American representative, because Lutnick is part of the government, whether we like it or not, he's part of the government. He makes such statements. This is, locker room brash talk that the Americans do. You come on television and you say some things like this, Modi's going to say sorry. And then you say, oh, he didn't come and he didn't call. Then Trump says he called. Then India says we had 8 conversations over the last period. I just don't understand what is happening. What do you make of this entire mess?
See, the Americans do have this brash, bravado, locker room talk, that sort of culture. But if you look at previous administrations, they haven't really genuinely behaved in this way, right? Go out in public and disparage other nation, be all scathing towards a nation, and say all kinds of things that are typically inconsistent from one day to another. The Biden administration did not do that. Trump 45 did not do that. Before that, Barack Obama did not do that. So this is a new phenomenon that we are seeing with Trump 47, the 47th presidency of the US. So this is a pressure tactic. Okay, they're going to make false claims and then they're going to use that as the baseline. I mean, look at what Trump has been doing vis-a-vis Operation Sindoor. He's been claiming that the Pakistanis shot down 4 planes, then 5 planes, then 6 planes, then 7 planes. The number keeps on escalating. So and what you will find is that in the West you have this culture of essentially of lying. That's something the Anglos are good at. If you look at Indian historical records and Indians dealing with the Anglos since the 1500s, you will see that kings have been writing that these people they cannot be trusted. You cannot take their word at face value. They're gonna say one thing one day and the second and something completely different another day, and they're gonna try and extract the maximum advantage out of you by doing these things. So what we are seeing is that Lutnick is playing the bad cop. I mean the worst cop. Trump is playing bad cop. Lutnick is playing worse cop. Then you have Marco Rubio playing a decent, good kind of cop perhaps, and that's what they're doing. So these are pressure tactics, and it's clear that they are lying. Lutnick is saying one thing one day and a completely different thing another day. And they're hoping, I suppose, that India will get pressurized enough to cave in and give in to American demands. But obviously, that is not going to work out, because if India does that, that's going to be politically terrible for the Prime Minister. So that is not something we can expect will happen.
Now here's the issue. Now, how much should India cave in? It's a legit question to ask, because see, what happens is everybody keeps saying, oh, government ye kyun nahi kar rahi hai? Why isn't the government doing X, Y, Z? Like, and what frustrates me about these discussions is like either India has to be entirely submissive, or America has to just give us a nice massage or something. Like, geopolitics is not like that. India will have to give in at some positions. America will have to give in at some positions. Now, what would be that sweet spot from both countries' perspective? Like where is this heading? Because right now the world is in flux. Like America just took over Venezuela and their oil production. Now again, I want to add some facts for people. The reason India does not buy Venezuelan oil and Iranian oil is literally because of America, and not this
Precisely.
administration. That is the Biden administration that had requested India to stop buying Venezuelan and Iranian oil, and India, because our relationship was on the upswing, right? We obliged them, and we did not buy that. And again, it was the Biden administration that told us to start buying Russian oil, and we obliged them, and we bought Russian oil. And now again, because it's the Trump administration that is telling us to stop buying Russian oil, we are reducing our Russian oil. But then what? Like, how do we go back to Venezuelan oil because now Trump owns it? Like, how is this happening?
So this is a great example of what the Americans do. See, India used to import about 10%, roughly 10 to 12% of its oil from Venezuela in the 2010s. And it's around late 2010s that the Americans imposed pressure on India, and we stopped buying Venezuelan oil entirely. When it comes to Iranian oil, we used to buy a lot of Iranian oil during the Manmohan Singh times and all that. And then the Americans imposed sanctions on Iran, and they said that India can't buy it anymore. So we obliged, like you say, like you correctly say. We have been very cooperative with the US. We have even participated in these sanctions and embargoes that the Americans impose on various nations for their own benefit. Now, do we just keep on going up and down as per American whims and desires? See, in the 2010s, India was a much weaker nation. Today, India is the fourth most powerful nation in the world. If you put economy and hard power, all of that together, India is the fourth most powerful nation in the world. But obviously, nothing compared to the US. The US is 25 times, let's say, more powerful than India. Let's not delude ourselves. So the US obviously is gonna expect that they're gonna keep on pushing India over. Push us in one direction, push us in another direction. And all of this, we are looking at the trade perspective, but it is all interconnected. I mean, there are other perspectives also. There's the geopolitical angle. There is what the Americans are trying to do right now in the world. They're trying to completely reshape the world order. Like you said, the world is in flux. They have imposed the Monroe Doctrine in the Western Hemisphere, and the Greenland acquisition, which will happen whenever. It's part of that. They want to control Greenland also. They are, playing around with the geopolitical, geographical choke points like not Malacca, but actually Bab el-Mandeb and Hormuz. They have, the Israelis have recognized Somaliland, which gives very soon the Americans and the West the opportunity, if they want, to blockade the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb. If they can do something about Persia, they can blockade Hormuz also. And that essentially has the effect of giving the West the ability to blockade Chinese trade and energy supplies at will. They don't have to do it at Malacca. They can do it at Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb. So they want to push China and Russia into isolation and closer together. And then they want to perhaps break India out of it and, let's say, vassalize India. So all of that is the objective right now. Syria is gone. See, you used to have China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, and Syria. This was the big coalition. Syria is now gone. You have an Al-Qaeda terrorist who is now ruling Syria. Venezuela was also part of that coalition, so to say. That's also gone now. So they want to break this coalition piece by piece. They want to break it down. Maybe Persia is next. I mean, it looks like the Americans and Israelis together perhaps may make a move on Persia sometime in the next, coming days, weeks, months, whenever. So the Americans essentially want to create a unipolar world order. They want to isolate Russia and China, and then perhaps create a rift between them also, if possible, and take the world over. And India, they probably feel, is an easier to acquire asset. That's why they have this containment policy around India. They did a regime change in Pakistan, West Pakistan, in 2022. Imran Khan's ouster, Shehbaz Sharif comes to power, who is a lapdog of the US now, and Asim Munir also. Then they do 2024, Sheikh Hasina's ouster. So Bangladesh goes back to East Pakistan status. They've done Nepal in 2025. They're essentially encircling India. They're creating a ring of thorns around India, and they want to contain India. They want to put India under increasing pressure so that India eventually at some point in time caves in. If India caves in to American demands, then Mr. Modi looks terribly weak, and maybe that would have the effect of having a regime change in India without any military force at all. So use the exact, you don't need to go and put in a new government. You just have to change the government. So it's a long-term plan that the US has, and the objective is to dominate the world. And India, obviously, they see it as an easier to acquire piece, easier to solve problem than maybe Russia or China, which are more intractable. So that's what we're witnessing.
Yeah, but इतना तो easy नहीं है यार India यार, मतलब we're not
नहीं ना?
any walkover. Like, first of all, I have to say this again and again. I'm so grateful to Indira Gandhi and Atal Bihari Vajpayee. Everybody who's smart enough will know why I'm grateful to them.
74 and 99.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
जाओ, जो करना है कर लो. मेरे अंदर का आसिम मुनीर जाग गया.
Yeah, I know. I mean, that's a crucial thing. See, आज
Yeah.
जितने भी राष्ट्र sovereign है, they are
Yeah.
sovereign only because they have nuclear weapons and the ability to
Yeah.
to deploy them, to deliver them. You need that. North Korea क्यों बचा हुआ है? छोटा है फिर भी. Because it has nuclear weapons and it has the long range missiles that threaten the US. So yeah, we are very, very fortunate that we had 1974 and then of course 1999.
Now, where do you think, at what stage in this weird sort of back and forth that India and America are having, does India start using its cards? Because, people keep saying India has no cards. I completely disagree. I think people have a very weird notion about India's place in the world. I don't certainly think India is some Vishwaguru or something, but India is no
Yeah.
walkover. Like, I can guarantee you 20 years ago, Canada would have walked over India. But like in the last 2 years, as someone who very closely follows India-Canada beat, I can tell you, India really pushed Canada to the corner. And in many ways, Justin Trudeau lost that entire election because he tried his best to put it all on India. And the way India insulted him actually eventually cost him his seat. He had to resign even before fighting an election. But like, India clearly is somewhere between a superpower and a middle power. I don't know. They'll have to create a freaking new category because India is all alone in there. India is no longer a middle power. It's more than a middle power. It's
It's
not
a great
superpower.
power, greatish power, perhaps. Greatish.
Yeah, maybe. So in such a scenario, like for me, Indian tech prowess is a real thing. I just don't get why people don't think Indian tech prowess, even if India is the global back office, like China is the global manufacturer. You think
Yes.
people can just shut China off? They can't shut India off in the tech world. And two,
Yeah.
China's population does not use American big tech. India's population does use American big tech. And like it or not, that's a giant leverage. Like, these are real cards. And it's rather naive to think that in the backdoor negotiations, हमारी कॉमर्स मिनिस्ट्री या हमारी मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ एक्सटर्नल अफेयर्स या हमारे प्राइम मिनिस्टर्स ऑफिस के रिप्रेजेंटेटिव्स ने कुछ बोला ही नहीं अमेरिकन को. हमने कुछ बोला ही नहीं. हमने ये बोला ही नहीं होगा कि ट्विटर बंद कर देंगे. हमने बोला ही नहीं होगा कि इंस्टाग्राम बंद कर देंगे. भाई, अगर बंद किया तो उनकी फट जाएगी. उनकी मेजर फटेगी. और रह गया मार्केट? कितने दिन अमेरिका के ऊपर करेंगे? सी, इट्स ऑल गुड फॉर देम टू से, जस्ट लाइक अमेरिका से, वी डोंट नीड कैनेडियन कार्स, वी डोंट नीड कैनेडियन ऑयल. No, you do. Because the entire supply chain is built around America and Canada. So that supply chain just doesn't disappear overnight, right? So a lot of back office supply chains are also dependent on India. I'm not saying forever, but to say India has no cards is rather naive. What are the cards? These are the cards I think majorly India has.
Yeah.
What do you think India has?
Yes, you're totally right. See, the back office of the world is India. The Americans outsourced two major chunks of their work in the past few decades. There's blue-collar jobs and there's white-collar jobs. Blue-collar jobs are your factory jobs, manufacturing jobs, etc. They outsourced all of that to China. And the Americans are kind of super dependent on China because of that. The white-collar jobs, the office jobs, back office and all that, I mean, all of that business process outsourcing and so on and so forth, all that was outsourced to India. So the Americans depend on India for all of that. They depend on India for tech support, for software, software maintenance and so much more. If that is cut off, let's say, in a completely hypothetical world, if you completely shut it down today night, 12 o'clock, it's going to be a disaster for every single Fortune 500 company in the US. They will be left without tech support. They will be left adrift. And the Americans will not be able to replace that in any reasonable period of time. So that is one big piece of leverage India has over the US. The second thing is that the Americans clearly have deeply penetrated India through social media, right? And that is a big advantage, a big strength that the Americans have. That's big leverage the Americans have over India, but it's also leverage we have over the Americans. If we shut down social media tomorrow morning, the Americans are left with no leverage. They can no longer interfere in India's electoral process. They can no longer influence Indian minds. All of that it vanishes overnight. I remember 2010. Around that time, it was Edward Snowden who had divulged that the Americans had something at the time called PRISM. And PRISM, what was that? It was various American big tech, big data companies feeding all of the data that is supposed to be personal data, private data, to the CIA and the US establishment. And they had these big dashboards of what's happening in real time in various countries. And one of the biggest pieces of information, one of the biggest sources of information that was being collected was about India. That's 2010. Today we are 2026. That's 16 years down the line. Imagine how much data they are collecting about India and whatever Indians are doing in real time. If we shut that off, if we shut off Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, etc., the Americans lose that gigantic source of information about India, and that leaves them without a lot of the leverage they have over India and a lot of the insights they get about India. So that's another thing. What else? When it comes to pharmaceuticals, okay, India, right? Generic drugs. I think India accounts for about at least a quarter, if not more, of the generic drugs that the Americans consume. We shut that down, it's going to create a health crisis overnight in the United States. Okay, so that's another leverage we have. So I'm sure there's much more, but we have all this leverage. We also have the Americans want us to be part of Pax Silica. It's not like they're doing some charity to us, right? Pax Silica is all about extracting rare earths and so on. And India is at least the third largest, has at least the third largest reserves of rare earths on the planet, if not the largest, because of recent recent discoveries. So the Americans seek to tap into that as well. And obviously the threat they're facing is that China could shut down its exports of rare earths and whatnot to the Americans. So they need alternatives. India could be a huge source of that. We have the reserves, but we haven't developed the means to extract and purify that, right? We could do it in the next 3 to 5 years. So we have all these things that the Americans need, not just want, but they need. Another piece of leverage the Americans have over India is that if you look at all our top-ranking officials and whatnot, they have family in the US, they have children sitting there. We shut that down like the Chinese have done to the naked officials.
भाई जितने MEA के तू हिस्ट्री निकाल, मैं तेरे को मजाक नहीं कर रहा हूँ. ये शायद मैंने तेरे को लास्ट टाइम हम लोग मिले थे, मैंने तेरे को लास्ट टाइम बोला भी था. मैं ना बैठ के सारे ऑफिसर्स है ना, उनकी औलादे किधर है मैं चेक करने बैठ गया. सारे वेस्टर्न वर्ल्ड में ओ माई एक तो ना हो, सारे ही है.
So that's a leverage that the Americans have over India. But if we cut that off by whatever means, like the Chinese are doing, well, that again is something the US doesn't desire. तो हमारे पास बहुत सारा leverage है, अलग-अलग प्रकार का leverage है. We will obviously put that leverage in front of the US when we have the negotiations, diplomacy behind closed doors. लेकिन हम public में इनके बारे में बात नहीं करेंगे. Obviously, the government doesn't want to divulge all this, that we are using this leverage or that leverage over the US. But we have significant leverage in various ways. We have Pakistan. We could actually tomorrow morning, make Pakistan break up in some way. That's also a leverage we have over the US. We could also do something on Bangladesh. So we have military leverage. We have all these sources of leverage that we discussed. I'm sure there's more, right? IT की बात कर ली हमने, backdoor की बात, back office की बात कर ली, pharmaceuticals की बात कर ली. I'm sure there's way more that we have. I mean, the Indian market itself is a big leverage. The Americans seek to tap into that market. They seek to export to India, but it has to happen on mutually beneficial terms, not in a one way, my way or the highway kind of scenario. So that's where we are. It's not like India doesn't have leverage. India has significant leverage. Some of it is softish leverage. Some of it is pretty hard leverage. And that's why we have this imbroglio, this impasse that we have between the US and India. India has leverage. The Americans are not able to break down. And obviously the Americans have tremendous leverage over India. So then let's talk. Let's talk and come to some kind of agreement that is beneficial for you as well as for me. It can't be all loaded in favor of you. And that's what India is saying. And the Americans aren't happy with that. And that's why Lutnick goes and blasts off about India. One day he says this, another day he says something completely contradictory. But it indicates that there is a certain element of frustration that's creeping into the Trump administration vis-a-vis India.
Yeah, I think लटने के ना उसकी हालत वो सतीश कौशिक का लाइन था ना, मैं तो आदमी बड़ा फ्रस्ट्रेटेड हूँ, उसकी हालत वो है. But on a very serious note, see, the problem with this entire thing is, in my view, I think why the trade deal is taking longer than normal is also because of the nature of the way both politicians, leaders are, Mr. Modi and Mr. Trump. It's a fact, whether we like it or not. Both have this hard man, I'm not taking a backseat image. Both are kind of put on the top by their voters because I'm a hard man. I ain't taking a backseat. Modi ji ka famous campaign tha ek baar, ye desh nahi jhukne dunga. It was a song Modi ji had, and Trump is always allowed it, make America great again. We're the best. We're the dominant ones. And I think what is happening is with Trump, he wants a photo op. Modi ji is never going to give him a photo op. I don't know how this gets resolved. I genuinely don't know how this gets resolved.
So my point is that, look, neither nation needs to bend. Neither nation needs to, to put its core interests at risk. Let's have a mutually beneficial trade agreement. Trump obviously wants to have a steamroller kind of approach. He wants either everything or nothing. That's what he is doing to all his EU partners, isn't he? He's steamrolling all of them. He wants Greenland. He wants it tomorrow morning. And the Europeans have sent a delegation to the US to talk about Greenland. Obviously, the Americans will acquire it. It's not like the Europeans can do a thing about it. And he has put all kinds of conditions on the members of NATO that you have to double your the expenditure that you have when it comes to NATO's upkeep by 2030. The Europeans have had to agree to that. So he's used to getting his way in this term. Since 2025 began, he's used to getting his way, and that's not working out with Mr. Modi. And that's why it's a question of there is an element of ego also to this. So Mr. Modi is not taking it egoistically. He's saying that, look, India's core interests cannot be negotiated, but Trump wants everything. So that's where we are. Eventually, I suppose at some point in time there's gonna be some kind of compromise, which is reasonable. It may take longer, perhaps, but I don't think either nation will. I don't think India will bend and give in to everything the Americans want. We are already offering a lot, it seems,
What if we see we've already increased American oil purchase? What if we also agree, from what I understand, already Mota Bhai, matlab Dhirubhai Ambani, he has started, the deal with Venezuela ka oil. I think, don't you think that the icebreaker you're talking about, कि हमने वेनेजुएला का तेल, हमको क्या फर्क पड़ता है, रशिया से तेल लो, वेनेजुएला से तेल लो, हम तो मतलब एकदम भनिया बुद्धि आदमी है, हमको तो जो सस्ता माल मिले हम तो खरीद लेते हैं. So इंडिया तो सबसे मतलब इस मामले में जितने हम बेशरम है, मुझे लगता है कोई बेशरम नहीं होगा. हमने रहा 2 रुपया सस्ता है, चल उधर जा रहा हूं मैं, तो हम तो ऐसे ही है. तो do you think that could be an icebreaker? What's your view? If we agree to buy Venezuelan oil?
I think that's a good icebreaker. I think it's a good one. So the refinery in Gujarat, in Saurashtra, around that region, the Reliance refinery, it's one of the 3 or 4 refineries in the world that can actually process the extra heavy crude oil that comes out of Venezuela. Every refinery can process sweet light crude or even heavy crude, but the extra heavy one, it's a tough nut to crack. So the Reliance refinery can do that. So the Americans have decided that all Venezuelan oil exports will happen via the US. So let's have it come in. I mean, if the Americans, if it makes the Americans happy, let's do it. So I'm sure there's these cherries on top that we can offer in creative ways to the US. Will it be sufficient to placate Trump or not? Remains to be seen. I think we can do 2 or 3 of these things, and hopefully it takes things forward.
Okay, now let's pivot into what's happening with Greenland and Iran and other things too. So this is यार ये बंदा बहुत कॉमेडी है, इसको सुन के बहुत हंसी आती है, मगर इसका ही सुन अभी ये क्या बोल रहा है ग्रीनलैंड पे.
How much money are you thinking of giving people in Greenland to get them on board with a possible U.S.
I'm not talking about money for Greenland yet. I might talk about that, but right now we are going to do something on Greenland, whether they like it or not. because if we don't do it, Russia or China will take over Greenland, and we're not going to have Russia or China as a neighbor. Okay. I would like to make a deal, you know, the easy way, but if we don't do it the easy way, we're going to do it the hard way. And by the way, I'm a fan of Denmark too. I have to tell you, and you know, they've been very nice to me. I'm a big fan, but you know, the fact that they had a boat land there 500 years ago doesn't mean that they own the land. I'm sure we had lots of boats go there also, but we need that because if you take a look outside of Greenland right now, there are Russian destroyers, there are Chinese destroyers and bigger. There are Russian submarines all over the place. We're not going to have Russia or China occupy Greenland, and that's what they're going to do if we don't. So we're going to be doing something with Greenland, either the nice way or the more difficult way. Please, go ahead, ma'am.
Mr. President, why is it so important to you to own it when you have a military presence there, which you could expand to affect security?
Because when we own it, we defend it. You don't defend leases the same way. You have to own it. And, you know, with a nation, look at what happened with Obama, with that horrible deal they made with Iran. It was a short-term deal. It was like a 9-year deal. Countries can't make 9-year deals or even 100-year deals. Countries have to have ownership. And you defend ownership, you don't defend leases. And we'll have to defend Greenland. If we don't do it, China or Russia will. It's not going to happen. We are not going to have, and I like China, I like Russia, I love the people of China, I love the people of Russia. I get along very well with President Putin, but I'm very disappointed in him. I get along very well with President Xi. I'm going to go over to China in April, but I don't want them as a neighbor in Greenland. Not going to happen. And by the way, and NATO's got to understand that. I'm all for NATO. I saved NATO. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't have a NATO right now. But we're not going to allow Russia or China to occupy Greenland, and that's what's going to happen if we don't.
What is his end game? The way he says it, you can't help but laugh. But the point is, he's saying, if this is his explanation that I'm not going to allow these people in my neighborhood, then he's justifying Russia's invasion of Ukraine, China's invasion of Taiwan, and I think India's invasion of anything it wants to in the subcontinent.
Well, if you look at it logically, if he says that I can claim Greenland because I have the might to do that, that obviously justifies any nation's invasion of any other nation. But the Americans don't operate that way. They say that what we do, others can't do. We set the rules, and the rules are different for us. That's always been America's approach. So Trump will say that somehow, in some shape or form, Russia's invasion of Ukraine is not justified. And if India does something in its neighborhood, that's also not justified. So the Americans always have this dual track approach towards the world.